Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Everybody is familiar with the emotion of frustration. It is among the truly universal human conditions. It is only the angels amongst us who never feel frustration, and even they may sense it inside them, but have the internal wherewithal to prevent it from surfacing. For the rest of us, we have to learn with this volcano that periodically erupts within us and hope for the best. There may not be anything uniquely human about this powder keg. There is no question that chimpanzees and apes experience it and display it in very human forms. How far down the evolutionary chain this goes is up to debate. It is difficult to imagine fish or lizards experiencing frustration. But it's not at all difficult to assume that dogs or cats share this wonderful feeling with us. It is a very basic emotion, one that doesn't require much thought or creativity. It is simply the feeling that arises when things don't go the way that we want them to. This in and of itself is very interesting. Why should we have this emotional reaction at all? Why don't we take things as they come and go along with them? This seems to have been one of the primary goals of ancient religious philosophies such as Taoism or Buddhism. One of the more famous ideas in Taoism is to inspire oneself to be like water, going with the flow and never attempting to fight the overwhelming power of fate. To those who are not familiar with it, it seems absolutely impossible. How does one master a feeling that is as basic as breathing? What could possibly enable us to control our deeply embedded need to have things happen the way that we want them to? Perhaps the solution to this puzzle lies in realizing the source of frustration. It lies in accepting the mysterious power of fate. Now, one could ask, why should I submit to fate at all? Why shouldn't I fight fate with all my power? Isn't that the sign of a real human being? That they refuse to relinquish their own innate gift of free will and struggle with all their might to control fate rather than be controlled by it. This is all true, but it comes with a price. To be a fate fighter is to submit oneself to the power of frustration. The two go hand in hand. Greatness comes in contesting the power of fate, but with it comes the frustration when fate wins the battle. The secret to mastering frustration seems to lie in recognizing when fate should be contested and when it should be accepted. This magic formula is the holy grail of emotional contentment. If one goes too far to the side of acceptance, one may not experience much frustration, but one may also not achieve very much. If one puts all their effort into battling fate and refusing to accept its decrees, much can be achieved, but at the great expense of much frustration. Is there a one-size-fits-all equation that solves this problem? Probably not. Things like this differ from person to person and from situation to situation. As we all know, this is something that has to be dealt with as it comes. But it certainly helps to recognize the dilemma for what it is and have some sort of idea of what to look for when things come to a crunch. The classic example of frustration in the Bible is unquestionably Cain. His offering was not accepted by God, and he was frustrated over the rejection. This was entirely normal and expected. When God asked him why he was frustrated, he must have been puzzled. Why wouldn't anybody be frustrated over something like this? God didn't wait for a response from Cain, but simply reminded him that he and he alone had the power to overcome his frustration and to make himself into an uplifted person. If he didn't use that power, he was told, he would take his frustrations with him to the grave. There is another classic example of this that frequently gets overlooked in the search for biblical personalities experiencing frustration. This is Bilaam, the mysterious prophet who was hired to curse the Israelites when they were heading up the eastern border of the ancient land of Canaan on their way to entering the Holy Land. His story is told in remarkable detail. It is one of the few biblical stories that is found in a source outside the Bible. He also has been forever enshrined as the primary subject of an entire parsha, though it is not called in his name. The parsha is called Balak. It is another parsha named after a person. In this case, the person is Balak, who was the king of the nation of Moab at the time. Moab was located in the area of modern-day central Jordan, around the city of Ammon. In fact, Ammon was the name of the ancient capital of Moab. Bilaam, who was the main character of the parsha, was a sorcerer of sorts from somewhere in the region of the northern part of the Euphrates River. This probably put him in the region of northern Syria. His reputation was gained from his ability to curse or bless people or groups. This was an extremely valuable skill to have in biblical times, since much of the whims and fortunes of life was believed to be dependent on such oracular powers. Balak sent representatives to hire Bilaam to curse the Israelites. He was offered a considerable amount of money for his valuable services. Bilaam told Balak's representatives that he would have to consult God on whether he could be part of this scheme. God told him to refuse. Bilaam told this to Balak's people, and they left. Balak sent them back with an offer of more money. Again, he consulted God, who told him this time that he could go with the men, but only under the condition that he never veer from the words that God spoke to him. Bilaam tells this to Balak's people, and they all set out to meet Balak somewhere in the vicinity of where the Israelites were encamped. The Torah describes Billums' journey in great detail. Although it seems like a trivial point to focus on, this section is perhaps the most illuminating in the entire story. It describes how he journeyed on his donkey, but encountered God's anger almost immediately. An angel of God appeared on the road to challenge him. For some reason, only the donkey saw this angel, and it swerved to the side. Bilaam beat the donkey to force it back on the road. The angel next stood in the middle of a narrow path through a vineyard with walls on both sides. The donkey again saw the angel and pressed up against the wall, crushing Bilaam's leg. Bilaam again began beating the donkey. Next, the angel stood in another narrow passage where there was no room at all for any maneuvering. The donkey spotted the angel again, and this time could do nothing but crouch down. Billums' frustration reached a crescendo, and he started beating the donkey with a stick. At that point, God somehow enabled the donkey to communicate with Bilaam, and it asked him what it had done that Bilaam beat it those 3 times. Bilaam replied, surprisingly, by insisting that the donkey was mocking him, and then he said that he wished he had a sword that he could have killed the donkey. The donkey calmly responded by asking Bilaam if he remembered anything like this ever happening in all his experiences with the donkey. When Bilaam said no, God finally opened Bilaam's eyes to enable him to see the angel. The angel asked him why he beat the donkey 3 times when it was really the angel that was challenging Bilaam, and the donkey was simply attempting to stay out of the way. The angel concluded by reminding Bilaam that it was the donkey who actually saved him, since had it not turned aside, the angel would have killed Bilaam. Upon realizing his blindness to what was really happening, Bilaam offered to return home. The angel told him to continue, but with the proviso that he only speak the exact words that would be told to him. The rest of the parsha deals with Bilaam's attempts to curse the Israelites, which always resulted in him blessing them instead. This happens 3 times, and each time Balak berates him for not doing what he was hired to do. Bilaam replies that he had told Balak right from the beginning that he could only speak whatever words God put into his mouth. Since God had blessed the Israelites and not cursed them, he was powerless to do otherwise. The story ends with a final long prophetic blessing concerning the fate of the Israelites and the surrounding nations. Both Balak and Bilaam went home disappointed that they could do nothing to thwart the will of God. What went on in the mind of Bilaam when he was beating that donkey? He didn't see the angel, but he must have realized that something unusual was going on. The donkey was just doing what donkeys do when there is a dangerous obstacle in the path. It swerved or jammed against the wall or crouched down. There is no question that this was frustrating for Bilaam to deal with, but there is also no question that Bilaam should have suspected that things were not going according to plan. What was he supposed to do? He did what any normal person would do. He blew up over his frustration. What should he have done? Perhaps he can be excused for the first time the donkey swerved. Perhaps we can also let him off when the donkey slammed his leg against the wall. These things happen, and they are classic reasons to give in to frustration. But the 3rd time was not normal. Donkeys don't just crouch down for no reason. It was time for Bilaam to open his eyes and see what was happening before him. It took the donkey's odd communication to wake him up that something was amiss. But even with this impossible experience, Bilaam still didn't get it. It took the angel revealing itself to him for Bilaam to realize that he was up against a force that he couldn't overcome. Only this convinced him that there was no point in getting frustrated over things that were beyond him. This is the first clue in the Parsha to that magic formula. We can fight fate to our heart's content, but we have to be open to the possibility that we won't win. While this may seem like a defeatist attitude, it certainly helps us recognize reality when it is staring us right in the eye. We try to beat fate all the time. We get frustrated over its incessant obstacles. In biblical times, they beat donkeys. We kick cars and toss things on the floor in anger and yell at our phones or at other people or at God. It is all a very human reaction to that waterless river known as fate, which has a very evident past and a very uncertain future and a present that seems like it is there to torture us. Frustration is our reaction to this challenge, but we can work around it like water works its way around rocks, by understanding when that obstacle before us is like an angel of God. It is there to remind us that some things are beyond our control. Shabbat Shalom.